Hey guys, how you doing? I haven't given you an update in a while. I'm making a few videos at a time here, and I just want to tell you about a specific thing I did and what I learned from it. So basically, many of us often feel we have a lot of different symptoms. One of those symptoms is we feel like we may be sick, like we have a flu-like type feeling, these body aches, this kind of just all the overall sensations that we're not well and we might be sick, like with the flu or something, or flu-like thing. And sometimes I experience that a lot, sometimes not as much. And I kind of know and knew that this is just another symptom of CFS, fibro, TMS, whatever you want to call it, stress illness, whatever this thing we're experiencing, whatever you prefer to call it, just this sort of unfortunate condition that we're in. I always knew that, I'm not really sick, most likely, but there's still but the anxiety and the fear gives you that little bit of doubt that gets you. But what if I am sick? Maybe I should stay down, in bed or whatever, or just not engage in so much activity. I shouldn't exercise because I'm just gonna make it worse, I should be careful. Now there's always a chance, yeah, right? There's always a chance that indeed sometimes people get sick. But overwhelmingly, the chances are that I'm not sick, that I'm doing just fine. But what made it especially apparent now, because we're in this pandemic, guys, remember that we're in the pandemic, there's this whole coronavirus thing going on? Yeah. I personally have really limited my contacts. I do wear a mask if I am anywhere, but I'm rarely anywhere. I don't wear just a mask, I wear a respirator. Because I don't want to get a virus with yet unknown long-term effects, and I'm in contact with my parents. Anyway, I don't want to get this thing, and I don't want to infect my parents. And the point is, though, that I've taken a lot of precautions to not contract any kind of a respiratory illness, which means I am highly unlikely to have a flu, and I'm highly unlikely to have a cold. It's basically almost impossible. Right? And yet, during this period, I have been feeling these symptoms like I have the flu or I have the cold, and it just sort of highlighted for me, okay, And another thing I did is every time I would feel this way, I said, okay, well, let me get some objective criteria, right? And I would take my body temperature. And if it's normal, within normal, remember it varies, sometimes it can be a little bit higher. I'm going to tell you in Celsius is like up to 37 Celsius is considered like borderline. You can convert to Fahrenheit yourself. I just don't remember at the moment. But normal temperature, like the upper bound of normal temperature. If it was within that range, I just went on with my walk, with my run, with my workout, whatever it is I was going to do with my work. And I just said, okay, well, I have an objective reading. You don't always have a fever when you're sick, but if you don't have a fever, it probably means you're not that sick, even if you are sick. So I just took that, just for myself. I decided, okay, I'm just going to take the temperature, and if it's normal, within the upper bound of normal, then I just go on and I just ignore it, and I know it's safe to ignore, especially considering that I've been, isolated and socially distanced and wearing, a respirator, and everything. So it really highlighted for me just how this thing works, and that in fact I need to be even more aggressive with challenging these sensations. Not challenging them, but just acting despite them and soothing myself and explaining to myself and reminding myself that it's safe. Yes, these sensations are quite real, quite unpleasant sometimes, but not dangerous, and not a sign that you shouldn't be doing stuff and that you should, be careful and so on. But then there's a kind of the other thing is, it made me realize that when I went through that period, some of you may remember, like in last winter, where I got sick a bunch of times, and the sickness seemed to last a long time. Much of that time I wasn't really sick. There were times that I clearly had something, because I did have a fever, and the night sweats and everything, and coughs, and I was like, just sort of sick. But then, like, I would take 2-3 weeks to recover. No. It was just those. I would be over the virus, but I would still be apprehensive because I still would get those symptoms, that feel like the flu. But my body has already recovered from the actual infection. But I would be apprehensive to resume exercise and just resume activity. So, in fact, if I understood things the way I understand things now, with how this whole thing works, I would more readily re-engage in exercise and other activity after contracting the flu or whatever, a cold. And this happened to me a few times, the past flu season, basically in the winter, fall and winter of last year, this year. It just made me realize that, I was probably not sick for as long as I thought. I'm quite sure now, reflecting on it and having experienced what I just experienced. The last thing to add is, eventually I decided I'm not going to take the temperature anymore, because it became another anxious habit. I noticed it became like I could only function if I took my temperature, and it became like this thing where, I have to take my temperature, to make sure. It was good that I did it, a bunch of times, so that I could see, oh, well, here's an objective reading of the temperature, and here's how I feel, and then I'm actually okay. Like, there's no objective problem here, and it's a kind of a rudimentary thing, your temperature, but it helped me. And then, of course, the other thing is I would look at the temperature and see, okay, it's normal. I would say, okay, well, I still feel like shit, but I'm going to go on anyway. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go for a run. And I would go for a run, and I would soothe, again, my anxiety like I do. And then I would reflect, oh, look, you felt like shit. You took the temperature. You engaged in a run. You engaged in activity, and you're fine. And it's okay. And it was okay. And you weren't sick. But remember how fearful you were. Remember how it felt, how much anxiety, how apprehensive you were. Remember that, and just repeat that process over and over. So it was helpful to once again, because this thing is, you can understand it intellectually, but then implementing it and sort of understanding it with every cell of your body, that's the work. That's the thing, So that's an interesting learning, an interesting way that I learned this, and it just strengthened my understanding of how this thing really works. I don't take the temperature anymore when I feel like I might have the flu, or whatever. I just go on and I say, I trust that the temperature is normal and I don't need to worry, and I don't want this to become like a crutch, that, I have to take my temperature, unless I'm really, really, like, obviously over the top sick, then of course, I would do something. I had to accept that I'm taking a risk. There's a small risk that I'm taking, that, oh my God, I am actually sick and I'm going to go for a run. And that's okay. Sometimes you got to take a risk, And one final thing in relation to all this I'd like to add is that I also took my temperature when I was feeling more or less normal. I always have some symptoms, but basically I was feeling pretty good. And I noticed, just to make sure, that because your temperature varies, so like sometimes I would take the temperature when I'm feeling kind of shitty, and it would be at the upper bound of normal, and I'd be like, But then I would take the temperature when I felt pretty good, and it would also be at the upper bound of normal, and then I realized, that's still within normal, so I shouldn't, pay too much attention to that, Basically, look for obvious signs, like cannot deny signs that something is wrong, If you're, debating, am I sick, shouldn't I? You're probably not sick, but it could be, So as I said, sometimes we take a risk. Okay, that's okay, So I hope you got something out of this whole discussion, this story that I told you. Hope you find it helpful. Let me know if you had any similar experiences, just what you think about this whole thing. All right, peace.